You're watching World Talks on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Hungarian President Tomáš Solyok has invited Péter Magyar to a meeting at the Sándor Palace on Wednesday, just a day after the Prime Minister-to-be called on Solyok to convene a new parliament, then resign. Magyar's victory on Sunday night secured a supermajority for the Tisza party, ousting Viktor Orbán and ramping up pressure on the president, who Magyar says is an Orbán puppet. Here to break all of this down is Joanna Rohozinska, Director of Central and Eastern Europe at IN2. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with actually a soundbite, a clip from Péter Magyar.
This is a mandate that will allow the transition to be as effective, peaceful and smooth as possible. And we thank every one of the 3,300,000 people who voted for us.
So that was Péter Magyar addressing not just media but his supporters on election night. When can we expect, though, to have a new operating government in Hungary? Péter Magyar to be Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, formally they have 30 days to form a government, right? So the transition's supposed to last 20 to 30 days. From what I understand, they're pretty well prepared to enter in, right? So, I mean, this has been a long time coming, and while the election victory itself, and particularly the scale of it, I think was a pleasant surprise for everybody. These aren't people who are unfamiliar with government and the function of government, right? So even some of the players are new, but the core team actually knows how government is supposed to function, so are well placed to form a new one relatively quickly.
Do you think the president will go as Magyar is pushing him to?
I mean, I honestly don't see how there's much of an option, right? So I think that the public demand is going to be such that the public faces of the current government, still the current government, are going to have to go. So in terms of the ministerial level, but on the presidential level, I believe as well, in addition to probably a number of state enterprises as well.
Péter Magyar says Orban should consult on all decisions while he is caretaker. Can he be trusted to do that? I saw those reports from Péter Magyar on Peter Szijjártó shredding documents at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in relation to sanctions. Should there be concern that Orban will not go quietly?
Orban has an interest of being the head of the opposition and remaining in parliament. And I don't think that there's much going to be done to jeopardize his position or the position of Fidesz as the minority party, right? Keeping in mind that it means that they get to retain their parliamentary immunity so long as they are a part of the government. That being said, obviously in certain ministries, like the MFA and certain others, yes, you can expect some shenanigans to be happening along the line. I also heard the rumors about the shredding documents profusely, but I think that it's going to be a hit and miss, right? So, I mean, there's ultimately a continuity in the functioning of the state that has to happen. So maybe I'm unduly optimistic that at least when it comes to critical industries and critical ministries, there'll be a degree of continuity.
Well, you mentioned Orban wanting to be head of the opposition. Is there good reason to be confident of a smooth transition for that reason and the fact that we saw him obviously very early in the night concede the election?
I mean, I think that from the reports that I heard going in, that there wasn't going to be a fight, right? That there was a prepared to kind of, not put up a huge resistance once the election polls came out, and particularly if they came out that strongly. There's not a great interest to have a counter-revolution when you have no basis for it whatsoever. And Orban, for all of his flaws, has always been a relatively savvy politician who knows how to read the room. Ultimately he failed, but I think going forward that's still something that's core to his personality.
Orban, of course, had an iron grip on state media, family and friends in high places, changed the electoral system to favour his party. Now, the OSCE has come out with a report saying this was no level playing field. Talk to me how Magyar was able to win so convincingly given that. I mean, was it the domestic economic discontent? Was it the frozen EU cash? What was that core reason that meant so many people, a record amount, came out to A, vote, and then B, vote so convincingly for Magyar?
I mean, it's a great testament that democracy actually does function, right? And so however flawed it may be, there's still certain constraints put on by the European Union and by the protocols of the state itself that the institutions did function. So the OSCE report also says that actually all of the offices charged with elections did function properly. On election day, there was really not much disturbances and not that many irregularities, which obviously doesn't mean that the whole playing field wasn't skewed road for months and years leading up to it. The reports that I've seen in terms of what the motivations of voters were first of all, the economic situation in the country, second, corruption, third, rule of law. And so it's all of these things that are basically the lived experience, the lived daily experience of people that started increasingly being a disconnect to what they were seeing in the media, for example, right? Propaganda only goes so far. At a certain point, real life takes over. They've been in power for 16 years. There's been a steady decline. And so I don't think that it was a single issue, such as the frozen assets. It was just a culmination of everything. And finally, an alternative appearing.
The OSCE also pointed out the ruling party, quote, benefited from systemic advantages that blurred the line between state and party. You mentioned kind of a win for democracy. Does this show that sometimes people power does work?
It does. I mean, it does, but it also is a testament to how practical and thoughtful and strategic the entire electoral campaign was, going back for 2 years now, right? Like, they learned the lessons of the failures of all the previous elections, and then sometimes there's just a moment, right? And so this is what it was, where all of a sudden it was kind of like the perfect storm of everything coming together. It is notable that the mobilization was a political mobilization, right? That it was rallied around a specific political entity as opposed to an effusive, if you want, sense of the right thing to do. So it was a culmination of everything combined with a really thoughtful campaign.
Péter Magyar has already spoken to reporters of all stripes this week. We obviously saw him speak to his supporters there, but also he gave this 3-hour press conference to, as I say, reporters from across the board. That would not have happened under Viktor Orbán. He also, on Wednesday, will appear on state TV, is what he's saying, and will appear on a state TV that he himself has called propaganda. What is his thinking there?
Well, I mean, the public television still reaches the broadest television audience in the country, right? And I mean, so it would be strange for a newly elected prime minister to not appear on public television. And as you know, public television changes often, right? So depending on who writes the rules, bringing back a balanced media space, I think, is going to be a huge priority for this government. I mean, it has been for every subsequent government that comes in after a curtailment of such liberties, for example. So, to reach the largest audience, it just absolutely makes sense.
How challenging do you think that particular part will be, given it played such a role in Viktor Orbán keeping power?
Yes, but it's also an interesting case study of the limits of state capture of media. Because despite a pretty thorough state capture of media and as a whole, right? So not just the public ones, but also certain private broadcasters, a capture of the advertising market, a structural disadvantaging of the independent media that was left, in addition to, pursuing criminal charges against them. But with all of that, one of the ODIHR reports also said that there was still media plurality. It's not that the independent media disappeared altogether, but it also means that this kind of like comprehensive strategy on the electronic media, on traditional media by the Orban regime, ultimately ran out of steam somewhere, because essentially the media landscape globally has changed as well. So that's not where all of the conversations are happening. And again, at a certain point, media reaches its limits and real life experience kicks in. So.
And of course, during the campaign, we saw the excellent work of some of those investigative journalists who then were prosecuted by the Orban regime, or attempted to be prosecuted, leaking those recordings between Péter Magyar and Sergei Lavrov, which otherwise we wouldn't have had to hand. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has compared this result to a revolution. She's likened it, or drawn links to the fall of communism in 1989. Is that how you see it too?
I've heard that a couple of times. I would probably say yes, in the sense that it's a defining turning point moment for the country and for the population as well, that they did this essentially, right? So I mean, for whatever external support and conversations on the European level and all the rest of it, ultimately over 80% of the population came out to vote. And that's a pretty strong statement in terms of where they want to be and where their future is heading, and drawing a very thick line from the past 16 years and looking forward. So, yeah, I would say it's a seminal moment.
How crucial do you think also Péter Magyar's election will be for Ukraine? Obviously, Ukraine kind of is for good reason, such a hot topic for European security. We've seen that the bloc in the EU in Brussels from the €19 billion loan. how crucial will unlocking that be for Ukraine and I guess at large European security?
Well, I mean, I think it's a huge change, right? So I mean, it means that one of the principal blocking points on a lot of Ukrainian policy came out of Hungary, basically, right? And so with that piece gone, it's a reordering of the geopolitics, I think, a little bit, and particularly the way that the EU can assist and relates to Ukraine, but also, frankly, you know, a huge blow against any kind of Russian operations within the European Union on a formal level.
I was thinking about this today. There's much being put on Péter Magyar's shoulders now, right? There's that weight of responsibility. He's run the campaign, like you say, for years. Now he's won. How much is at stake for Péter Magyar, for Hungary? Because it has to work for them, right? Otherwise, Orban will return in 4 years. Well,
I'm not sure Orban will return in 4 years, but something will happen, right? Yes, but on the other hand, I think that one of the things that's positive in listening to interviews with people on the ground in Budapest and around Hungary is that there's also a degree of realism in terms of who Péter Magyar is and what the possibilities are in terms of the enormity of what has to be undone. So I think it's more a matter of, you know, I don't sense the elated expectations of everything turning on a dime within 6 months. There doesn't seem to be that kind of a pressure, but there is an expectation for the core complaints and the core platform points that he made in terms of returning rule of law, in terms of corruption and all the rest of it, to address those issues relatively quickly. If he's a savvy politician, he could probably do a fair amount, enough to satisfy the electorate for the next couple of years. Keeping in mind this is also a very broad umbrella movement that at some point is also going to start fragmenting as things improve. You know, in terms of the economy, once the kind of like basic things are taken care of. But that's for another day, and I think that 4 years is still a fair bit away, and there's a lot more currency, and there's going to be a lot more support of this government, I think. Much water to flow under the bridge from here. Joanna Rohozinska, Director of Central and Eastern Europe at IN2. Thank you so much again for your time. Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. Do stay with us for more news and analysis. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.